Meta AI is the personal AI to help you with whatever you need. Plus, it meets you where you are. Not only is Meta AI now an app, but it's also on the apps you already know and love: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. Plus the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. It's easy to access wherever you are. So whether you're talking or texting, Meta AI is convenient to use throughout your day. Experience our newest AI that's tailored to you by downloading the Meta AI app. Try the Meta AI app today on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive, America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Everything is more exhilarating when you're on your motorcycle, just like your bike is more protected when you choose Progressive Motorcycle Insurance. They offer coverage for your bike, starting as low as $75 per year. And they keep things affordable, with discounts like paid in full, multi-policy, and responsible driver. So raise your kickstands and get to quoting at Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. $75 premium is for state minimum coverage. Not available in D.C. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, James Shopta at C70. We just got Alan Medlock back, and then he takes off for Hawaii. Decided he didn't want to do a podcast while he's sitting on the beach. So this week we've brought in Eugene Tucker. He writes Portion Under Bush. You'll find him at I_am_not_Eugene on Twitter. Eugene, thanks for joining me this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I need a shorter Twitter handle.
Yeah, that one goes a little bit longer, but people can find you, and that's a good stuff. Like I said, you write Portion Under Bush, Substack. It's also a publication. Tell me a little bit about that and how that got started and how it goes.
Sure. It's funny. So I don't know if you remember back in 1992 when the team did their whole 100 years kind of celebration, and I'll never forget that KPLR jingle. 100 years, millions of cheers, 100 years, Cardinals on 11. And so as part of that, they came out with a video, going over the franchise history that I think my brother and I wore out watching. And there was also Bob Brogue and Jack Buck wrote kind of like this encyclopedia history of Cardinal baseball from the beginning to 1992. And again, just I loved it. I got it for Christmas. My parents stood in line at Walden Books, if you remember when those things existed, to get autographs for my brother and me, get it inscribed. And I love that book so much. And I was around 2016, I just had this thought of, boy, it's almost due for an update. And, so much has happened between 1992 and 2016. And so I just started kind of in my free time writing like kind of these yearly annual, like what happened in a given year. And mine actually went from 96 to 2016, and pretend nothing happened between 93 and 96. wasn't much in Cardinal history those years.
No, you don't have a lot there. No.
Right. But so I just started writing it down, and it was these kind of yearly recaps that would be, I remember I had like just who the manager was, and then like a team MVP, a team LVP, a team Cy Young, and then I called kind of the pitching the team Kip Wells, or Cy Kip Wells yard Wells Award, and then talked about like just memorable quotes from that year, best games, best home run, and I did it for every year, and all of a sudden I was looking at this and I had 250 pages, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this, and so but it also gave me this idea that there are other people out there. There are so many great stories, and there are other people who
Mhm.
have their stories and their memories, and it really is important to preserve these memories. I've been begging my folks for years to kind of write down their memories and their stories that they have,
Mhm.
and you know, and I like to think we all know the stories of Musial and Pujols and all of the greats, but there are stories that of great things that people forget and could be forgotten unless we preserve them. So that's really where it came from, is a place to kind of share stories, preserve stories, and look at these stories as things to learn besides just wins and losses.
Yeah. That's really cool. When you're talking about that, it reminded me of some project that a friend of mine, and we kicked around. We never got started fully, but it was a like a Cardinal Wikipedia type of thing where
Oh
you
yeah,
had all the players and or the years or all that kind of stuff that got listed and out. But also there was a section for people to write just have fan memories. It may have been hey, I saw that guy hit, a home run on my, the first game I ever went to or something, stuff like that that,
yeah.
doesn't get into any kind of, quote official history because it's not important to a grand scheme of things, but to individual memories are kind of what baseball is all about. So to be able to do that and to be able to bring in people to talk about, things that normally you wouldn't have talked about, that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the. I think there's two stories in our last issue that really stood out for me. Was it's kind of like what I envisioned it to be. And one was Joan Neeson, who wrote for the Athletic, wrote for Sports Illustrated, wrote for Washington Post, born and raised in St. Louis. Wrote this story about Adam Wainwright, watching Adam Wainwright strike out Carlos Beltran while a freshman in a dorm in Georgetown.
Mhm.
And this idea of being so far from home, trying to find yourself, and then here is also somebody who's not that much older than you, Adam Wainwright in 2006 at the time,
Right.
also finding himself, and and then and watching it with other kind of St. Louis expatriates, if you will, that in this dorm room. And it's like, yeah, that is Cardinal baseball, right? That's what
Yeah.
we're looking for, is community and finding home with through this team. And so I love that story. And then the other one, so that's actually been the most read story on our site. And the other one was the second most read story, was by Marty Wilhelm, who lives out in Denver, writing about Rick Ankiel and being in the
Mhm.
stadium the night Rick Ankiel comes back and hits his
Yeah.
home run. And I just got goosebumps reading it, because I mean, what Rick Ankiel is, there's no better story in
Right.
sports, in my opinion. And just like the excitement that you were able to capture. And I think I think I love that idea of yours of the Wikipedia, and being able to add those things, because we all have those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, and that's what, there are podcasts out there that just focus on the history of the game of the Cardinals. I mean, and they can do that because it's so deep and rich, but also because so many people bring so many things to that, right? The memories they have of, Lance Berkman or some, or Khalil Green or something, I mean,
Yeah.
people that you don't think about until you get to the immaculate grid or whatever the case may be when you're trying
Right,
to
right.
pull some guy up from those teams. But just knowing that, I mean, there's that saying, what, that every player is somebody's favorite player.
Yeah.
And I think that being able to express that a little bit is a really cool thing.
And that's was one thing that I was trying, and I with this, is to not have it just be hey, remember when this happened? Like, was
Hmm.
kind of almost like the Chris Farley show interview on Saturday Night Live. Like, that was pretty cool, right? And that's something like I loved about your story, for those of you that don't know. And Daniel wrote about Lance Berkman for our last issue as well, and the probably sometimes footnoted 10th inning of
Yeah.
Game 6 of the 2011 World Series. But it has, there are things that have meaning, and it brings up these emotions, and it we can find meaning in these things again, just instead of just their wins and losses.
And also I think to go along with, you put out, you've got the writing, but you also tend to illustrate it with artwork modified to be Cardinals. Uh,
Mhm.
where did that concept come from, and how do you figure out how to illustrate?
So I will say I am not the illustrator. I have somebody that does it for me, and he is amazing. And I really appreciate him doing it. And but so I personally I love art history. I always have. I took in high school we had an art history class, and I took it actually in college too. And I think being in St. Louis, I have my art museum membership, and I think that it's such a we're so lucky in St. Louis to
Mhm,
have Forest Park and the zoo and the art museum. And I just loved going around wandering through the art museum and just kind of enjoying paintings. And so it's just something that I enjoy. And again, it has a little, I think like you said, it adds a little extra flair to it, and it tells a story in and of itself.
yeah.
Um, and again, one here, I know we're going to get into the Cubs Cardinals later, but one reason St. Louis better than Chicago is I took my son, and my wife was with us too when we went up to Chicago, and he must have been not even 3 yet. It was in
Mhm,
2016, and we had our St. Louis Art Museum membership, and we went to the Chicago Art Museum. They have American Gothic up there and all these great paintings
mhm.
and Nighthawks, and so I was like, oh, let's go see it. And I think we have reciprocity with our membership. And we got there, and no room at the end. They turned us away. We were trying to learn for free, and they're like, no, you have to pay, $50 or whatever. So I was like,
Mhm.
forget it. We'll just,
Yeah,
yeah,
not that important.
yeah,
Not that important. I mean, if we sat here and tried to list out all the reasons that St. Louis is better than Chicago, we would have quite a show, and we
yeah,
might never get to anything else. But and I say that as a person that has never been to Chicago and rarely been to St. Louis. But I
yeah,
think we all know that. So let's talk a little bit about this week then.
yeah.
Let's. I mean, Cardinals take 2 of 3 from Cincinnati, and then split with the Cubs. And you know, it may have been the most frustrating split that the Cardinals have had in a long time. To go and win 2 games at the beginning of that series, and one in definitive fashion, one in dramatic fashion, and then I don't wanna say not show up the last 2 days, but it definitely dropped off a cliff.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I was thinking actually, and this is probably my background, and I'll just quickly, like, my grandmother was one who kind of one of the people who introduced me to the Cardinals. She loved them so much, and the minute they started losing, she would turn it off, convinced she was a jinx. She was very superstitious. And I have to laugh because after Arenado made that play on, geez, was that Tuesday night? Yeah,
Yeah,
Tuesday night.
yeah.
And everyone was reveling on Twitter and elsewhere about PCA and his boneheaded mistake. I just had that superstitious jinx feeling, like, boy, we're almost too excited about this.
Yeah.
and it really was like nothing. And I agree, it was a complete letdown to not score over the last 20 something innings of the
Mhm.
series. But yeah, so in my mind, I was like, oh, it's we can only go downhill from here. We're enjoying this too much. Pride cometh before the fall.
Yeah, I will say I expected, Pete Crow-Armstrong to hit a home run the next day or something of that
Yeah.
nature. I expected him to have an impact on the series, which he really didn't. I mean, except for that, except for his, defensive lapse and his questionable bunting attempt, the Cardinals kinda kept him in check over that series, which I guess given the hype, and I hadn't really seen him play this year, but given the hype and going into it, and a 2020 player, and obviously playing very well, I was just surprised that he didn't put a stamp on this series. I'm glad he didn't, but it was very surprising.
Yeah, it's funny. I think was it Ben Hockman who wrote this week, or I apologize for not knowing, but that PCA is a good. He's like the next Cub you love to hate.
Oh yeah.
And I cannot agree more. Like
Mm-mm.
I have, I love his story. I love the fact that his mom was in Little Big League, a great movie. But boy, I cannot stand watching him play, and it's because he is so good. It's that Tom Brady level of, oh, I really don't want you to win, even though you probably deserve it.
Yeah, and I was texting somebody, jokingly, of course, but that saying that he's got a punchable face. I feel
Yeah,
like that works there. I don't know. Maybe it's just because we know how good he is, and I mean, it is very funny for us to sit, of course, there and talk about that. We've got Wilson Contreras on the team now, who was basically that when he was a Cub, right? I mean, we didn't have anything to do. Wilson Contreras was, a jerk, and who wants to have this guy? And now I don't think anybody, you can get a line of Cardinal fans in front of Wilson Contreras to defend him because it makes a difference when they're on your team.
it's very funny you say that because I have a very good friend, very close friend of mine who is a Cubs fan, and I know it's amazing to have that, but so I asked him yesterday because he made a comment about Wilson Contreras getting so upset about
Mhm.
thinking that the Cubs would intentionally hit a player to bring the tying run to the plate. He's like, that's
Right.
such a Wilson Contreras thing to get upset about. And so I asked him, I said, has your opinion of him changed, or do will you always have that 2016, his home run in the NLCS against Kershaw, and just him being a Cardinal, will you always have that? Or I mean, being a Cub, you will always
Mhm.
have that. And he said, no. He's like, I'll tell you, he's honest from my fan perspective. He's like, I'll always have positive memories. And it's easier now to get to laugh and roll my eyes at him for being a hothead, as long as he's not beefing with, as long as he's beefing with every team but my own.
Yeah.
so, so yeah, I think that sums it up well, right? It's the
Yeah.
guy you love to have on your team, but boy, do you not want to have him against you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I did see some tweets or things from Cub fans, kind of railing on Contreras, and I was thinking, just 3 years ago, you would have been defending him for his
Oh,
passionate, and everything like that,
100%.
and that's the nature of fandom. I'm not
Yeah,
casting aspersions by any means because, I mean, we do some of that as well. I don't imagine we were, although it helped that Jim Edmonds wasn't that good when he went to Chicago, right? I mean,
yeah.
we didn't have to, you know, try to downplay Jimmy Ballgame. It was just Jimmy Ballgame was making his tour of other teams, and he was kind of just trying to hang on. It wasn't like Contreras, who's still kind of in the prime of his career.
Yeah. And that's it's kind of fun with going back to PCA. It's kind of fun to have like a Cubs player to hate. Like I kind of feel, growing up when I did, the Cubs had, the infield was what, Mark Grace, Ryan Sandberg,
Hmm.
Sean Dunston, they had Andre Dawson. Like those are fun guys to watch play baseball. it's tough
Yeah.
to it's tough to dislike any of those guys. And even that 2016 team, as much as it frustrated me to watch them almost go wire to wire, like they were a good team. Like Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, that's fun to watch those guys play baseball. Now I remember 2003. I did not like any of those guys. I could not stand Zambrano. I could not stand Pryor, especially. So it's nice to have. It's nice to have like to care again. That
Yeah. This
it's
is
not like you
true.
can get upset like, oh, it's Felix Pa and Junior Lake. I really can't stand those guys. It's like, what, they're 60 and 100. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. I just, I mean, I don't know that I ever pity the Cubs, but
Right.
I'd rather that than I'd rather be looking down at them than looking up at them. But unfortunately, lately it's been the other way around. The Cardinals had a chance to really get to make a dent. I don't, and it's not like they're completely out of this race or anything like that. But even winning the series, taking 3 or 4, would have brought them. I think that would have given them a little bit more momentum. They would have maybe given the Cubs a little bit of looking over their shoulder. Instead, to split and kind of be where you were beforehand, and then just 4 more games off the calendar is a little bit frustrating. I mean, depending on how you look at this season, right? I mean, if you're looking at the season as the Cardinals should be, trying for the playoffs, then that's a frustrating series. If you're just kind of, hey, anything is gravy as long as these players develop, then maybe it's not so much.
No, I agree 100%. The one silver lining I tried to convince myself of last night is, to your point, a split is good against a team that does have World Series aspirations and, you know, fought back. Didn't obviously put runs across the plate last night
Right.
or yesterday afternoon, but fought back. Didn't you know? And again, and I think of what everyone has always said, that in 2023 and 24, if they went down at any point, even on Tuesday night when they were down 2-0, 3-0, I would have probably turned it off and been like, it's over.
Mhm.
So the fact that they fought back, they split against a team that has been dominating the NL so far. I think the silver lining to me though is Cubs have to go play Houston, who is sizzling this year, and then we get a 500 Guardians team. Obviously, and we have Sonny Gray going tonight. Um, so yes, it's disappointing, but it's better than losing the series to me. And let's see if we can make up some, try and take 2 or 3 from Cleveland and hope that Houston takes 2 or 3 from the Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also punctured any mystique around the Cubs, right?
Oh, sure.
That if they had come in and just rolled over the Cardinals, then we would have probably reevaluated where the Cardinals were. It's like, okay, they're not quite to that level. The Cardinals played with the Cubs complete. I mean, except for Game 3, they had no problem. They had no problems matching the Cubs, at least. Like you said, didn't get any runs across on Thursday, but brought the tying run to the plate. And I think on the whole, if the Cubs are the better team head to head, it's not by as much as we thought it was going into this series.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, you didn't have Sonny Gray, you didn't have Newt Bar. Not
Mhm.
to, I don't want to be the excuses guy, but I think a point was proven that we can stick with them, and we still have half the season left. A lot can happen,
Yeah, yeah,
and
and
we get
we'll
them in a
see.
couple weeks. We get them next week, right?
Yeah,
We're up there. We're up there for 4th of July.
yeah, week from today, they'll be playing an afternoon game in Wrigley Field, which may or may not be cooler than it was yesterday in St. Louis. So we'll see, I guess. But yeah, and I mean, again, not having Yvonne Herrera and Jordan Walker is also something. I mean, especially Herrera, who has been really effective, and throw out the lefties at the Cardinals. They can be not having Herrera there to break that up kind of
Yeah.
hurts a little bit. So who knows?
Imagine this: the best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
I'll tell you one thing though, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but one thing that this week taught me is, boy, I really hate this new scheduling format.
Oh yeah,
And it just, having to wait to play the Cubs and how exciting those first 2 games were, and even the theatrics and the fireworks at the end of the game. It's like, I just it's neat getting to see the Mariners and the Tampa Bay Rays and everything. And I remember as a kid, kind of feeling out and not getting to see Frank Thomas and Ken Griffey, but boy, it'd be nice if we just played more Central teams.
yeah. Regular listeners have heard me rail over the balanced schedule ever since it was proposed, much less put in. So I'm completely on that board. I understand the idea of seeing other teams come in, but I rather have the rivalries. I'd rather beat up on each other to some degree. When you played 19 games against the Cubs or the Pirates, you knew everybody on those teams, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
knew who was going to be the problem. It's the whole reason Ian Happ has a career, I think. It's because he plays 19 games against Cardinals all the time. And I also like, if you're going, and I've never been a big interleague fan, but if you're going to do it, I'd rather the Yankees coming to St. Louis be an event rather than every other year, here they come. I think at some point in time, and maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things, and with players changing and stuff like that. But I think at some point in time, that becomes less of a thing, right? It's like if I don't catch them now, I'll catch them in 2 years. Instead of I need to do this because they may not be here for another 5, 6, 7 years. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I was thinking, so I did get tickets for the Yankees game, the
mhm.
Sunday game, and I'm going to go with my dad, and he has not seen the Yankees play in St. Louis since 1964. But you're right. In a couple of years, are our kids going to be like, oh, I'm going to take my dad to see the Tigers because the last time he saw the Tigers was in 2006. Like,
Yeah,
no, he
no,
probably saw him last year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it just and then when they do expansion, because that's going to come. Will things change? Um, I think I wonder adding another two other teams makes you feel like you're going to really have to mess with the schedule some, but that's still a ways down the road. Um, but yeah, I'm not a big fan. I understand, and a lot of people are. And Tony La Russa was up there in the booth on Saturday night, and he mentioned he liked the balanced schedule. And a lot of people do like that for those reasons, but I just think to me, especially in today's day and age. Now, granted, I'm not in St. Louis, and I always caveat that, right? So for me, I'm watching these players on TV one way or another, right? I'm not seeing Shohei Ohtani. Well, actually, I did see Shohei Ohtani in
Yeah,
person because we
right,
were
yeah.
there, but normally I'm not seeing Shohei Ohtani in person. Whether he's playing against the Cardinals or if he's playing against the Rockies, it's kind of the same experience. It's not like when our parents were growing up where they could only see people that came and played the Cardinals because there was just no way to watch any other baseball except for maybe the game of the week or something like that. And so I just again I think that part's a little overrated, but then again, I'm not at the ballpark all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll never forget, and I wrote about this on one of the stories that I did, but I'll never forget back in, let's say it was '95. It was after the strike had ended.
Hmm.
The Mariners came to St. Louis to play an exhibition game, and my uncle Don, great uncle Don, I remember asked me at Easter breakfast. He said, Is your dad going to take you out of school because it was a matinee game to go see Griffey?" And I was like, "No." He said I had to go to school, and he was like, "That's crazy. This is the only time you're going to get to see Ken Griffey Jr. play baseball." And me being naive, I said, "Oh, they'll play each other in the World Series." And I'll never forget his face. He was like, and he just looked at me, and was like, "This team ain't going to the World Series." And it's just funny, that innocence of being a child and being like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make it,"
Yeah.
just like laughing at me. And so,
Well,
but yeah, that was what it used to be. Like,
yeah.
yeah, you're never gonna see those guys.
To be fair, 96 they could have, so you weren't
Like,
that
yeah,
far off. So,
right. And Griffey
uh,
was here a couple years later playing for the Reds, so I got to see him. Yeah.
honestly, that's one of the players I actually made it up for the Father's Day game where he hit 500. I was
Oh,
actually
that's
there for
awesome.
that one.
That's awesome.
So happened to I knew somebody, we had tickets, and it happened to line out that I kept waiting for him not to hit. In fact, I remember being pretty sure that, he had missed he'd not homered for a day or two or something. I was like, he's going to get up against, I'm pretty sure it was Matt Morris, wasn't it? And I'm like, he's going to get one off of Matt Morris. I mean, because I think Morris was having a little bit of home run tendencies. It's like he's going to get one, and sure enough, he hit 500 there. So, but it's fascinating because it seems like everybody was at that ball game as
Yeah.
I've gotten to know people on Twitter and things of that nature. And it always, pops up and like, oh yeah, I was in that game too. It's like, well, I guess and not surprising though. I guess it was a very popular ticket. So
Yeah, I think that was 2005, was it? Or
2004.
2004. Okay. I was going to say there was one year I think Matt Morris led the league in home runs
Yeah.
given up. It was
And I know this
yeah.
because my wife was pregnant with our first son, and she'd grown up in Ohio. Her dad was a big Cincinnati fan, and but at the time she had gone looking for Dippin' Dots,
Oh.
and so was in line for. I think it was in line for that when Griffey hit his home run, and so I've never. But that may
That's
have been
that
my.
that actually reminds me of a story. So I went to opening day in 2008 with a very good friend of mine, Chris Bosler. And
Mhm.
as we were going down, and he grew up in Decatur, Illinois, went to the University of Georgia. So he Cardinal fan, but he'd never been to many Cardinal games. And as we're going down to the ballpark on the Metrolink, he says, "Boy, I really hope that I can see Albert Pujols hit a home run today."
Mhm.
And he's like, "I've never seen it in person." And sure enough, he's in line for the bathroom or to get a beer, and Albert Pujols homers. it's, it's like, of course, of all the of all the
Absolutely.
times,
That's
yeah,
yeah, you just gotta know when Albert's coming up in the next inning or 2 because you can't go
yeah,
through lines like that any that quickly. Oh, man, yeah, that is and those are the things. Those are the memories we have, right? I mean, those are the
right.
we kinda go back to what we're talking about. We remember the big games and stuff, but we also remember, some random game in the middle of a season just because of things that happen like that, so.
That was actually my speech at my brother's wedding was
Hmm,
exactly that, because that's one thing that my brother and I have always been with is the Cardinals. And
yeah,
we unfortunately, I guess not unfortunately, but I'm 4 years older than him.
yep,
And so I go to college and he's in school, and then when I come back, he's up in college, and so we always made sure to go to Cardinal games together. And we just used it for whatever happened. It was the things I remember about those games are not the games themselves. It's
mhm,
everything else that happened. Like we saw one guy get kicked out of a Braves Cardinals game, and it would have been 2008,
mhm.
for heckling Russ Springer. And it just it's those moments that really keep you coming back. I think
Yeah.
it's not the wins and losses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the the memories and the friendships and things like I mean, I think back, you and I were both at Blogger Day this year.
Yeah,
But, I've been doing this for a long, long time, and the people that I've gotten to know through this whole process, and it's so great to then, spend a day in the afternoon with them at the ballpark. And I mean, except for Kyle. I mean, but we tolerate Kyle. But it's always great to be in those. And it really I don't remember, very rarely to remember much about the game, but I just remember being around, hanging out, seeing people and getting to talk to those that normally are just words on a screen.
yeah. And it's something that it's a question I try to answer, and I don't have an answer for it. And so if you have one, I'd love to hear it. Maybe it can help inform me. But I I sometimes ask, like, why do I care if they win or lose? Like, why? You know, I think one thing that has hurt sports, not just baseball, but I think baseball more than others, is the idea that it is not a successful season
Mhm.
unless you win the World Series.
Right.
And I just and I find myself, and I will admit, as I get older, I'm not bothered as much by the wins and losses,
Mhm.
just because life is in the way of things. But I don't know if I have that answer. Is like, why isn't it enough just to know that there's Cardinal baseball today, and that we get to go to the game and meet new people and meet new friends. And I went a couple weeks ago when the Blue Jays were in town, and I randomly sat next to this guy who used to write for Sporting News and was telling me stories about all of the people he's interviewed, and knowing Will Leach. And he was just, I guess, his kind of demeanor, he was asking people around him, like, what do you remember, when was the first game you remember? And it's like, that's really the point of this. But
Mhm.
I mean, it's nice to win, but I just
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an answer to that, or I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, but was that Ryan Fagan?
You know what, might have been, I can't remember his name, I can't
Yeah,
remember
I
his
I
name.
remember there was I think that's I mean, he may have been on the show once before, back when he was with Sporting News. I think that's who, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, interesting. Um, yeah, I don't know. It is. I mean, obviously, part of why people get into watching sports is the competitive nature of it, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
just if the Cardinals and the Cubs went out there and didn't keep score, you would lose a lot.
Oh, 100, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so if you're going to compete, you want to win. But I think there is that. You're right. I've always said I at the end of the day, if they win or lose, I'd rather more of my days end happy with a win than a loss. But that means 82 wins is a good season,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right. Right.
and I think for the most part, I think that is. If you win more than you lose, I mean, it's not necessarily up to expectations, and especially there are times in the Cardinals span where that would have been a significant disappointment just because of the expectations on there. But on the whole, yeah, I think you've gotten more joy than you've had sorrow in that regard. So I agree that this idea that you have to win the World Series for it to count is overstating it significantly. And I hope that, and I think that depends on the fan too, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of fans out there that are not that way, but the ones that are kind of overshadow things. That being said, that doesn't mean that fans shouldn't push for the team to be better, right? I mean, that's not we can't. I don't want us to sound like we're just going to say, yeah, do whatever you want as long as you win more than you lose. I don't think
Yeah,
that's what we're.
as long as they try, that's all. Yeah,
Yeah,
and have
yeah,
fun.
right.
As long as Nolan Arenado has fun, I'm fine. Yeah,
Good
no,
good job, good effort.
yeah,
That kind of thing. No,
yeah,
I don't. Obviously, and especially if you're going to do this, have the that you're not just a casual fan, that you're writing and you're
right.
podcasting and you're doing things of that nature. Obviously, you're going to spend more time and be a little bit more invested in it, and you want to see some results at some point in time. But yeah, I mean, just results are not necessarily. I mean, one team wins the World Series. Two teams play in the World Series. Nowadays, yeah, getting to the playoffs is a little bit less of a yeah. If you're not making the playoffs, you have to be really bad, I think, or something like that. It feels like it, but there's still a value to making the league championship series and
Yeah.
honestly making even the divisional series now. If you can make it into the playoffs, you're doing something. But if you're making it even deeper into it, I think you have to feel like that's a very successful season, even if you didn't complete the goal that maybe you set at the beginning of the year.
No, I think you're right, and that is something that a couple things that I try to remind myself is because I had so many great memories of that 2006 run. That was
Hmm.
in my cognitive life, that was the first World Series win.
Right.
And I mean, I remember parts of the 87 World Series,
Hmm.
but watching it with my dad. But I just, how that makes you feel. And especially, I'll say, like the 2004 World Series, I think I was a horrible fan. I think I turned off game 4. I don't even think I watched the full part of game 4. I was like, I'm getting upset watching this. This is not healthy.
You didn't need to see the
Right.
celebration. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that. I wouldn't
exactly.
want to watch it either.
But in all of that, in thinking that the Cardinals have won the second most World Series at 11. And the World Series has
Hmm.
been going on, for 125 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've only won 11 of those 100 and something World Series, and we're number 2. Like that's,
Hmm.
so like you said, it's very tough to do. And I also try to remind myself, because I agree 100%. It's not, you know, you want to see them win. It's more fun, it's more exciting. I worked in downtown St. Louis, and I can't tell you how kind of sad it's been these past few falls and late summers where it's
Hmm.
so empty and nobody
Hmm.
cares. And there is something about walking outside the office and on a playoff game day, and everyone just excited and nervous, and
Yeah.
there's an energy there that is has been missing the last few years, and it's sad. It's frankly sad. But I try to remember myself too that sometimes it's cyclical. Like, we were just talking about the 95 season.
Hmm.
The Cardinals corner infielders in 95 were John Mabry and Scott Cooper. And I think they combined hit 8 home runs in the 95 season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Combined.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, though, we have Albert Pujols and Scott Rowland as our corner infielders hitting
Mhm.
80 home runs or close to it. And and so I try to I try to remind myself, it'll turn. But you're right, it does feel longer now after all the success we've had.
Well, and that's the thing also, right? I mean, there came a point there that it didn't feel like it was a cycle. It felt like this was the continual obvious
Yeah.
thing that was going to be. We're always going to win the Cardinals. I should be careful with my we's, but
Sure.
that they're always going to win 90 games, that they're always going to be in the playoffs, that they're always going to be a World Series contender. That going into a season, you can expect them to be playing in October, and they did that for so long that they've become that the fact that when they started missing October, but still are winning 80 something games, you felt okay, they're a little bit down, but they'll be back. And it took 2023 to really realize that this is the beginning of a new cycle, if you will. And we look around baseball and you wonder, I mean, we think about the Dodgers and how amazing they are and how that seems to stretch on forever. Like they're never going to actually not be good again. And who knows, but it's not been, but what, 10, 15 years, I guess maybe it's closer to 20, but that they were kind of the laughing stock, right? They're having ownership problems. They weren't anything special. And the Yankees have had their cycles as well, right? Even if they've won 27 World Series, they've also had the 80s. They also haven't won a World Series since 2009.
Yeah.
So,
and that was a long drought too. That one, because they hadn't won before 2000 before that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once they had that little mini dynasty there. So nothing lasts forever, I guess, is the kicker. And what's down today will be up tomorrow, except for maybe the Rockies. I think they may be permanent. But still, and so I think that we had to expect that this was going to come at some point in time.
Yeah.
But when you're in the midst of the good times, you're not looking toward the bad times.
Agreed. And it was there was some bad luck too, I think, that has led to this
Sure.
point. I think, but there was some, I think the one thing that gets forgotten a little bit too is the hacking scandal that we had with and the fact that because they knew they were going to lose their draft pick, they reached on Delvin Perez.
Yeah.
And that gamble just didn't pay off. And I think I've mentioned to you on Twitter, I know, is that to get back to those glory years of the La Russa era, I think the answer is pretty simple. You just need to draft somebody who becomes the 5th greatest player of all time and criminally underpay him for 10 years.
Yeah, I really don't know why
it'll
they
work
haven't.
out.
Yeah, I don't know why they haven't really
Yeah.
put that together yet. But yeah, that is the kicker, right? I mean, that we don't think about the fact we kind of think about, hey, those teams were so good. We don't think about the fact that you had a Hall of Famer playing at bargain basement rates that allowed you to build around him and put together one of the best teams that we've ever seen. And once he left, they kind of got by for a little bit on some of the talent that they had. They transitioned well.
They did.
But there's no doubt that stretch of 20 something years of successful Cardinal baseball would have been probably a little bit more spotty if it hadn't been for Albert Pujols at first base.
Agreed. And they also benefited too from the Cubs and the Brewers and even the Astros when they were, at the end of their National League run. They weren't developing players,
Yeah.
and unfortunately for Cardinal fans, the Cubs, when Theo Epstein came in, they hit. It didn't last long, and it probably, luckily for us as Cardinal fans, that dynasty after 2016 did not extend to the success that we as Cardinal fans got to enjoy. Right. But they hit on all of those draft picks. They hit on Bryant, they hit on Schwarber, they hit on Baez, and they were able to develop those guys. And now, unfortunately, they did what we as the Cardinals. Again, I apologize for also using.
No, you're right.
I don't think I'm part of the team, but
I know it's going to happen. It's just not as often as Chip Carey, maybe.
Yeah. But the Cardinals had success, and I think of I think it was the 2009 draft. If you go back and look at the 2009 draft, they got Shelby Miller, Rosenthal, Matt Adams, and Matt Carpenter in that draft. And that's your 2013 NL champion core players there, and into 14 and 15 as well. And we just haven't had that draft yet. And it's not anything against Randy Flores, but I should say we haven't seen the fruits of a draft like that yet.
Right. Yeah, I think that, and I mean, 2020, you're only drafting 5 players, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously that was a very good draft for the Cardinals with Walker and Wynn and Burleson, and I think, is there somebody else that made it up from that one? I can't remember, but anyway, but you got Tink Hens in that draft as well. He hasn't made it yet, but hopefully will soon. But that was also only 5 players, right? And then the cutting to 20 rounds in the draft, which doesn't impact a lot, but I think it probably does some. I mean, the Cardinals haven't gotten like superstars there, but you do have a chance to develop your team a little bit in that regard. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we haven't seen the 13th rounder that turns into. I don't remember where Brendan Donovan was drafted. It feels like he was a little bit later.
I think you're right. Yeah, he might have been a later.
Yeah, I'm thinking like 8th round or something for some reason, but I'm not. Kyle's over there listening and screaming it out right now, but still
seventh round.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're very close.
Very close. But that, that's the kind of player that the Cardinals need. They also need the superstar, right? They need the Albert Pujols type, but they need those kind of players to come fill in and play above what everybody expected to be the 95 win team that they have been in the past.
So let me ask you, talking Brendan Donovan, let me ask you this. Let's say we get to the trade deadline here in just about a month or so. If they are in this position 5-6 games over 500, what would you want them to do? Same position now. Let's say we stick around this area, win a couple series, lose a couple series, but we're right around 5-6 games, say 5-6 games back of the Cubs, 5-6 games over 500.
I definitely don't want them to sell the farm to try to win. I think there are some creative ways that they could add players. I think, there's that idea that they could try to trade Ryan Helsley and let somebody else cover the relief or the 9th inning. I think on paper that works. I wonder how much it works in the clubhouse, though.
Yeah.
We saw that with Josh Hader a couple years ago. I think that no matter what, I think this team has, if you look at it in the general manager point of view or whatever, some of the terminology that we've heard them say in the past, this team has earned being rewarded. And in that regard would be adding something, probably just a, back end arm or some sort of a relief arm that helps. But they've overplayed it. They don't deserve for this team to just kind of get stripped down because they're not going to make the playoffs or whatever the case may be. They've earned, I guess they've earned a chance to get a winning record, I guess, in my mind. And so, yeah, I'd probably just add, some sort of arm that helps maybe the bullpen or something. I mean, I'd like to see the McGreevy and, if Quinn Matthews is ready to get him into the rotation and maybe that moves out a Fetty or something like that. But, I don't know how all that mechanically works, but that's what I'm thinking. What about you?
I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, and it's an interesting position we're in because I agree. I don't want them to sell. I never want them to sell. And I think, and again, talking what we were just talking, we've been very lucky that other than 23, I can't remember a year that they did actively sell at the deadline. And I don't want to tank. I don't like that idea. I'm somebody I'd prefer to your point earlier, to prefer to go 82 and 80 than 60 and 100 for 2 seasons, hoping to get draft picks and then build up. But let me get back to the point, is that I think we're in a precarious position because I don't know what we have to sell, but then I'm also worried of, we don't have that Albert Pujols to build around to bring people in to say we're one piece away. And so I think I would be of the mindset that Matz, Fetty, Helsley are probably your best targets, kind of, to maybe, if you're in that position, to see if you can get almost like another Fetty like guy
Mhm.
that you're going to have 2 years of control, but is going to be able to get you some more quality starts. But I hope they don't trade Donovan because I really like him. But I think that to me that would be the sell. That'd be the sign of selling because
Yeah.
you have a guy who's he'll be 29 next
Mhm.
year, and I hope they don't get rid of him.
Yeah, and I would really be stunned if they did that at the deadline.
Yeah, but
Now
he's probably the crown jewel of the team right now. Other than your Mason Wynn
right.
and all of the those pitchers that you mentioned.
He the most attainable
Yeah,
of the crowd. Yeah,
yeah,
and that does I mean, when you get into the winter and, depending on what Nolan Gorman does the rest of the year and depending on how ready you think JJ Weatherholt is and depending on who they draft in the draft here coming up, um, you know, is there a case for making, an offseason trade of Donovan if it helps everything? I think there could be one. I'm not saying I'd advocate for it, but there are a lot of middle infielders, and if he can bring you back a quality young pitcher, then maybe you discuss that. And I think that'll be interesting because Hein Bloom comes in who has less of a connection with these players. I mean, he's been here for a couple of years, but he didn't draft any of these guys. He didn't sign any
yeah.
of these guys. Um, you know, and he's got a background from Tampa Bay, who has notoriously been unsentimental.
Right.
Does he look at, okay, we can get better by trading somebody like that because we can backfill what he gives us. And I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. But when you get a guy like you said, 29, we kind of think about some of these guys being really young, but they are young. They're definitely young compared to me. But they are getting old. They're a little bit older in baseball years than we think.
Right. Yeah, I think I think Helsley's interesting. In
Mhm.
my theory, I'm going to give the team the benefit of the doubt. So I hope people don't think I'm always carrying water for the team. But I think my thought is with what happened with Helsley is that they definitely were going to trade him this offseason. But then everyone saw what the Brewers got for Devin Williams,
Mhm.
and I just don't think the offers were out there. And I
Yep.
think they made a calculated bet of a risk that let's hope he can pitch for 3-4 more months like he did last year. The market will either we're doing well at the deadline and hey, it's a win for us, or the market will be more robust and we'll get more for him.
Yeah.
That's my theory of why he started in St. Louis. I know people get upset like when he's obviously been having some tough outings, and I
Mhm.
know people like, oh, he's losing his value and we're not going to get anything for him. I I don't think they were going to get anything for him this offseason. I think if it was there, I think they would have taken it.
I think there's a lot to that. Um, I also think when they went into this winter, they thought Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras would want to leave,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
once they wanted to stay, it became a little bit more reasonable to try to compete this year.
yeah.
Because I don't know that I mean, they did want to trade Nolan Arenado for salary reasons,
Well,
but
as we found out, they did twice,
yeah,
basically.
right. They
Traded him
traded twice,
twice.
basically. But I think that that was at least in some degree. I mean, some of it was salary for sure,
Yeah,
but some degree it was we may not be as competitive as Nolan wants us to be, and let's give him the opportunity to go to a place that could be. Um, because I think we've seen we've seen it over his time here, but even more so this year, how competitive he is and how a good team raises his game because his
yeah,
offense is still not where it has been in the past, but he has more his defense has been insane. And he has more fire and I think more it feels like, at least looking for the inside out or outside in, more leadership and more connection with some of these guys than he's had in the past.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's been fun to see that renaissance. and that fire in him in the post game comments the other day about just how much fun he's having coming to the ballpark, and it shows. And I still, it's how lucky are we as fans that we get to see two of the greatest, or have gotten to see over the last 20 years, two of the greatest defensive third basemen in the history of the game.
No, yeah.
And
I
it's
mean,
fun to watch.
spoiled. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you're a Cardinal fan that doesn't like defense, I don't know how you're a Cardinal fan
Right.
because I mean that has been
That's
such
our
a
thing.
hallmark, right? I mean that's been such a hallmark. I mean Ozzy and we've had Jim Edmonds out there, and then Roland and Arenado, and Brent Rio was solid. Just at the big positions. I mean, they even had Goldschmidt, right? That played a really good
Yeah.
first base, and granted, you don't see that. And then of course Yachty behind the plate. I mean, and now you've got Mason Wynn, and you know, um, and we're even seeing Victor Scott too is good, and Jordan Walker's improved, and somehow Alec Burleson is like a Gold Glover now. I don't
Right.
at least this week. So I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, and that's all. I think that's for me. That's some of the more fun things, even maybe more than. I mean, a timely home run is obviously huge, but to be able to watch, the plays that Nolan makes on a regular basis is just outstanding.
Yeah, when he hit that home run on Saturday afternoon against Cincinnati to
Hmm.
tie it, I
Hmm.
mean, that was, and just again, and like you're saying, just the excitement in his face, and I forget who said it. Somebody said it on Twitter about like him high fiving the bat boy
Yeah.
coming in. I mean, that it was, that was just a fun game to watch.
Hmm.
And I mean, I can't stand the extra inning rule as long as it
Oh yeah.
benefits the
No.
Cardinals, but um baseball is fun. It's just, they're a fun team, and you
Yeah.
you can't ask for much more. Maybe a few more wins, but
Yeah, but I mean, again, you're having an enjoyable time, and there's not been too many games this year like Wednesday's game, and to some degree
yeah.
Thursday's, although the ending was a little bit more um, inspired, maybe. That have just been like just drags.
Right.
They have, even when they haven't won, even the couple times where they've been down, that like we said earlier, they rally, they put something together, even if the runs don't come across. They're playing defense. They're playing a good game of baseball, even if they're not winning. So it's been a lot of fun to watch that after the last couple of years that have been. I don't want to say dour, but it's a little bit closer to that.
And just and boring. Like I remember my dad telling me that, asking him about the 1970s, and I think
Hmm.
that's I think it's one reason that, to your point, I think obviously Whitey Ball was exciting, but I
Right.
think more than anything to it was like my dad always said, the 1970s Cardinals were just boring. It
Hmm.
just wasn't fun to watch. And then when you get the Whitey Ball and Lonnie Smith and Tommy Herr and Ozzy and you know Vince running all over the place, like it was just fun again. And and I kind of feel like that's what we're on, that to go back to the cycles. We're on that cycle again
Hmm.
where it's good. It's going to be fun again. And
Yeah.
part of the reason it is so fun is to what you just said. The last few years were dour and just boring baseball.
Yeah.
Like you could, I think Mo said it the other day when we were up there. You could just turn it off in the second inning if they were down, and
Hmm.
you wouldn't have missed anything.
Yeah. Yeah. You weren't going to, and it's hard to again. I'd have to say this before. I don't want to lay the blame on Paul Goldschmidt because I don't think it's fair. But it's also like one of the few players that left from last year is Goldie, and I think the team tended to, I don't know, defer to him and Nolan.
Yeah,
Kind of expected them to do it, and I think they realized over the last couple of years that these guys weren't going to be able to. Although Goldschmidt's had a renaissance in New York, these guys weren't going to be able to carry the team like they had in the past, and people were going to have to do something about it, and that's what we're kind of. I think that's the reaction we're seeing is, bringing in the, moving, getting guys that can run, getting guys that can, you know, hit to all fields and things of that nature, and not relying on the home run as much.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad to see Goldschmidt doing well, because he was a great guy and he was fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that he's having success. And it does sting when you see these guys go to other teams, but it's always, I always laugh too, because you'll see on Twitter sometimes people will be like, oh, here's another one. And you're like, yeah, but a couple years ago we were complaining that Jeremy Hazelbaker was doing well.
Right.
What's he
Right.
doing?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
guys are going to go on hot streaks. That's baseball. But
Well,
I am glad to
yeah.
see success. I want him to have success elsewhere. Just wish it was here.
And then we do, but then it's also like at times it's like, well, one, that was 3 years ago, right? And now they're having success. We wouldn't have wanted to wait around. And two, sometimes it's like, well, if Paul Goldschmidt had taken some sort of $10 million contract, one, we don't know that he'd be doing that here. And two,
Right.
Then you've got Contreras that is either catching, which means Ivan Herrera's not playing, right? Or because who knows about the DH spot, or Contreras is traded, right? So, the ramifications of it's not just as easy as to plug in, plug him right in. And I think that we often forget about all of that, right? I mean, we forget about, we just like, man, I wish they'd done that here. And we do, and that's really legitimate. But we also, if you think about it, how different, it's the butterfly theory. How different would your team be if he's still here? So anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we've come about to the end of our time. Is there any topic we didn't touch on today that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Like I said, it was won 2 or 3 from Cincinnati, split with the Cubs. Could have been a better week, but could have been a worse week too.
Yeah, and you hope you kind of hang in there, and if you can win the series against the Guardians, and then go to Pittsburgh and hopefully do well there, and then you get another shot at the Cubs in Wrigley, and those games in Wrigley are always chaotic, right? There's always plenty of interesting moments in there. So, hopefully, when Alan and I are back at it next week, we're talking about a successful week and a team that's even closer to the top. But
getting ready for a good 4th of July. Some 4th
that's
of July
right.
fireworks from Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of fireworks in Wrigley, even if it is in daytime. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, Eugene, I appreciate you joining me this week, and look forward to having you back on later on.
Yeah, I'd love to. This was my first podcast experience. I've always been told I have a face for radio, so hopefully I have a voice for it too.
I have a face for radio and a voice for print. So,
But no, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
It was a good time.
And can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
So, Portion Under Bush, we're going to have another issue coming out during the All-Star break. It's going to be called If the Accident Will, and it's going to be about players who got their chance to play and finally get some playing time for the Cardinals due to fate or an injury or things out of their control. And we got some great articles about Jim Lindemann replacing Jack Clark in '87 and Tito Landrum having to get plugged in for Vince Coleman. One of the ones I'm really excited about is going to be about Augie Bergamo, who only played 2 years in the majors, but he was the man that stood in for the man when Musial went to war. He replaced Musial, and so his daughter is actually going to write kind of her memories of her dad and the stories that he told her about playing with the Cardinals. So we got a great, and then also, and on top of that, we have interviews with Abraham Nunez, who took over for Roland in 2005 when Hesop Choi and was named Scott Erickson conspired to derail our World Series chances. And then an interview with John Fulgham, who played for the Cardinals in 1979, and one with Micah Franklin that I think people are really going to like. He played 1,100 minor league games before he got his chance to get 17 games with the Cardinals in '97.
Very nice.
So, so it's a great issue. So I subscribe and follow along with us.
Yeah, everybody head over to the Substack to get to that, and it's always enjoyable. Eugene, great to talk to you. Alan and I will be back next week. And until then, good night.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
0-1 to Poole. In the air, left field, and Pujols has given St. Louis the lead. A dramatic, towering 3-run home run. Stunned